Hi, I'm Dr. Shiloh.
And I'm Dr. Scott.
And this is LA Not So Confidential, the forensic psychology and true crime podcast.
Each week, we explore the intersection of psychology, the criminal justice system, and entertainment.
Today, our episode is on the forensic psych topic of childhood psychopathy. Welcome back, everyone. Happy November. We are on the downhill slide. What are you getting me for Christmas?
I don't know. I'm going to have to work on that after I recover from freaking daylight savings time.
You know, I already have your gift.
Oh,
and
of course you do.
I'm about 3/4 of the way done with my Christmas shopping, but I'm very excited for your gift.
Freak. I mean, I love you to death, but you're a freak. I think I did that one year. I think the first year I was on ADHD medication and the dosage was too high. And that was the year that I bought all of my Christmas presents by October.
You were Oprah. Everyone got one of everything.
Everyone. Yes. Because you know what my secret is now is I got to ask Anthony if Shiloh has this. And of course, Anthony is the most hilarious texter because it's like Ernest Hemingway. It'll be like one word. No.
Oh, I know very, very well. He told me, by the way, that he felt like you ghosted him on Instagram. I'm like, Scott is on Instagram once every 7 months. You can't count on him there.
Yeah, I'm never on Instagram. I should, but it's just I don't know. I'm such a Gen X/boomer on Facebook. I gotta
you love the Facebook. All right.
So housekeeping, we got some new members in Patreon, which is very exciting. We have a live stream coming up.
Yeah, on the 18th. We're going to be doing a live stream with the author of a book about that infamous school shooting by the female perpetrator, the I Don't Like Mondays case.
Yeah, which inspired a song by, was it the Bangles?
No, not the Bangles. You keep saying Manic Monday, is it? But no, it was a different
I thought it was Manic
song.
Monday. It wasn't? Okay, we're on wrong. Good.
I mean, the lyrics are about getting to work and I don't know. I mean...
Okay.
But that should be a great live stream. We met and Lee Hunt at CrimeCon UK. So we're going to have him on to talk about his personal connection with that case and his book about it. So stay tuned. Go to our social media to get those dates again. If you forget, November 18th, Saturday, always 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And you can get that in any of our Linktree socials. YouTube, just subscribe on YouTube. You'll get it all.
You get a great reminder and please join us because we love having lots of people there to interact and ask questions. So last week we dropped our monthly vintage episode that focused on the serial killer Robert Rattlesnake James. And he is a killer that used his smooth Southern charm to leave a trail of destruction from the heart of Alabama across the United States, all the way to Los Angeles, conning and killing many of the women who had the misfortune of crossing his path. His spectrum of known crimes includes insurance cons, murders, and even incest. So please check it out when you get a moment.
Yes. So we are back on track today with a new forensic psych episode, and this one will include themes of child abuse, homicidality, explicit statements of harm coming from children and perpetrated upon children. So heavy in terms of child psychopathy and children who have perpetrated murders. So please listen with care today.
So folks, in past episodes and in many of the interviews that we've had the opportunity to engage in for other shows and even news items, we've covered examples of adult psychopaths and the latest research on how those behaviors emerge in the human psyche. So in this episode, we're going to focus on some of the very, thankfully, rare examples where children have presented with significant symptoms of psychopathy, and sometimes in the absolute absence of what are considered to be vitally contributing factors.
Yes. We have Amarjit Sada, the world's youngest known serial killer. In just 1 year between 2006 and 2007, he killed 3 children, one of whom was his sister. Born in 1998 in a small town in India, not much is really known about him due to his young age at the time of the crimes. However, Indian law states that a child cannot be sent to prison. Therefore, there have been some reports that it's likely he was sent to a home for juveniles. And there are even some reports that although he should have probably been there until he was 18, he was probably released around the age of 16.
So that is a more recent example. And if we go a little bit further back to the early 60s, we have Mary Bell from the UK, a very notorious child killer a killer of children and a child herself. And she gained infamy for her involvement of the murder of two young boys in England when she was just 10 years old. Her victims were Martin Brown and Brian Howe, both aged 3 and 4. And particularly chilling were Mary's actions in engaging with her victims' parents almost immediately after she committed their murders. She became one of the youngest individuals in the UK to be charged with murder.
And then we have Carol Edward Eddie Cole, who was a convicted serial killer who terrorized the American West in the 1970s. He was responsible for at least 15 murders beginning at age 8 and later denied that the deaths had been accidental, stating, quote, "I was primed. I had made the mental commitment I was going to get even with my mother, and things just built up and became an obsession," end quote.
So we start off with these brief examples of child murderers just to give you an understanding that this is a real thing. It does exist. And of course, in today's world, it would be splashed all over the news. And it is when a child of this age commits these crimes. In the past, it actually wasn't. It was not promoted. I think that generally news organizations did not know what to do with it. And maybe that was better. Maybe that was a better phenomenon. But those crimes are sort of laying the groundwork for a major presentation throughout this. So we're going to be focusing on one particular crime in depth and then give you what is the research about child psychopathy and how it differentiates from adult psychopathy. And it gets a little lost in different diagnoses.
Yes. So I'm going to start us off with a quote here for our first case study that we're going to talk about. Quote, "My son is a monster, and because he is a monster, I have lost my daughter." So that was written by Charity Lee at the age 46. And she wrote that in her journal less than a month after the killing of her 4-year-old daughter, Ella. And that was in 2007. Her son, Paris Bennett, went on to assert that he had sexually violated his sister after watching sexually explicit pornography. The chilling crime sent shockwaves through the community and received widespread media attention. Bennett's premeditated actions revealed a level of callousness and violence that were horribly exceptional for his young age, leaving the Texas town and even the nation bewildered and disturbed.
Bennett's motive for the murder was rooted in a disturbed family dynamic and a desire for revenge against his mother. In later interviews, he openly asserted he felt neglected by his mother's primary attention toward his younger sister. So he plotted a meticulously calculated act of violent retribution against this perceived slight. Charity Lee learned Bennett was using the computer to search pornography terms such as S&M, bondage, and sadism, going so far as to search for snuff films as well. And this all occurred just a few hours before her daughter's murder. And after this terrible review of the computer browser history, she confronted her son.
So initially, after his imprisonment, Bennett admitted to looking at these materials, but with the excuse that he wanted to, quote, "see it and get mad." After several years of incarceration and then as an adult, he changed the story with the admission that he had actually killed his sister to prevent him from revealing that he had actually been sexually abusing her. And again, in her journal, Charity, the mother, stated that, quote, "he sexually abused her that night, and he admitted the more violent he became, the more excited he became, ending in death for her and in climax for him," close quote. The crime scene investigation did reveal his genetic material on Ella as well as on her clothing. Bennett's planning, including the careful consideration of potential alibis, suggested really a level of strategy, as well as elements of cunning and manipulation that's generally out of character for a youth at his age. And this level of planning and violence stands in great contrast to the vulnerability of his young victim, who was only 4. You wouldn't need that much planning to really just easily perpetrate against a victim that young. We've talked about power bases in the past, and we've also talked about when the act or the violence is above and beyond what you would need to perpetrate the crime. That is a whole other element you're working with.
Absolutely. So apparently that night, Bennett and Ella were in the care of a babysitter. And according to follow-up interviews, he was able to convince the sitter to leave, which then allowed him to enter his sister's room and commit the crime. And in Charity's retelling of this story of what Paris had told her, the violence was carried out with utter calmness, strategy, and precision. He described himself as not having any huge manic excitement physically. He wasn't frenzied. He wasn't so enraged that he was out of control. And it went on to back that up in the forensic pathology results, which showed that the wounds he inflicted on his sister went a full range from shallow jabs and punctures to deep stabs. He later, in interviews, confessed to the law enforcement that he intentionally and deliberately stabbed his sister slowly, and I'm going to quote from an article here, while removing the blade each time with a deliberate glacial pace, and compared the experience to that of stabbing a mattress or a marshmallow.
Just that description is so devoid of emotion.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that is a great example. Yeah.
But
a horrible, but very apt description. Yeah.
Yeah. And following the stabbings, Bennett called a friend from school and had what was described as a casual and relaxed conversation for about 6 minutes before finally dialing 911. One report states that he pretended to follow the emergency dispatcher's directive to perform CPR on his sister while actually making no genuine attempts to save her life. Initially, Bennett claimed that he committed the violence because of a visual and auditory hallucination, that his sister had transformed into a jack-o'-lantern headed figure, flames coming out of her head. And after multiple interviews and the grim inevitability of his incarceration set in, he admitted that he had strategically planned the crime while also considering similar violence against his mother.
So in an interview later, and also I want to share with you a quote that's from one of the resources that we have in our show notes. Quote, he stated that the primary reason he did not proceed with his plan was due to the realization that taking someone's life was far more challenging than he had anticipated. The secondary reason was his understanding that if he killed me, my suffering would have only lasted a few minutes. However, by leaving me alive without my daughter Ella, he ensured that I would endure a lifetime of anguish. And that is a quote from Charity Lee's book. So Charity is clear in her book that following the arrest and trial, she was never in doubt about the very real possibility that he would, given the opportunity and a motivating emotion, turn his violence back towards her. The stark reality of that emerged when he attacked her in the visitors area of the jail where he was being held. He slammed a table against her waist, pinning her against a wall.
Yeah, and Charity has also talked a lot about her own significant life challenges, including being a former heroin addict and at one point slipping into her old ways with substances when her son was 12 and Ella was 3. And this was after a dozen years of sobriety, really, right before Bennett was born. But eventually she went on to get sober again. But she has stated in regards to this, quote, Paris was angry with me. He had every right to be. It was a really hard time for us both. So did my relapse turn Paris into a murderer?
It's a very interesting question because we talk about, your metaphor is the three-legged stool. The way I picture it is what's the kindling, what's the flame, and what's the accelerant, right? And I would say that there's a lot more going on. I mean, for one thing, as a clinician, I'm always absolutely in the support of anyone's efforts at recovery and radical authenticity about the cost that substance use has had on your life. So I really support her in being open and authentic about this. But there's a lot of other stuff that's going on to get an individual to the point where they act out in that specific way with what you so wonderfully described earlier about the overkill aspect of it. Right. So it's a horrible confluence of events, but I would want for her to know that she wasn't the match that set that fire. Very unlikely. Following his arrest, Bennett's case drew intense scrutiny from the public and a number of legal experts, and that led to debates about the nature of juvenile justice and the capacity for juvenile rehabilitation in cases of extreme violence like this. Bennett's trial was complex, to say the least, and the intricacies of his defense and prosecution highlighted the challenges of understanding his psyche and his motivations behind these types of severe murderous acts while they are committed by a minor. And here's another quote from Charity. My son is a psychopath. I can't help him. That may not matter in the long run. What may matter is I can't, not at this point, give up on him either. I love my firstborn with as much intensity as I have since the day I found out I was pregnant with him.
God, that's so heavy to hear through a parent's eyes and her experience. And it's a reason we picked this to talk about sort of towards the top is that when this happens, when children do unspeakable, unforgivable things, don't really hear from the parents. And she's one person that has put herself out in the media to really, I think, try and help just a layperson and researchers understand this. All right. So as we dive into the research here, there are a lot of problems in making generalizations about behaviors of any subset of the population, and children and teenagers are certainly no exception. Throughout history, children have been alternatively and simultaneously characterized as little adults and feral animals.
Exactly.
So both pure-spirited and pure evil. I guess we just can't make up our mind which is which. Much of this misaligned perception is due to the cultural norms and a long misunderstanding of childhood development, biological needs, and interpersonal individuation and exploration. Children are so often held to unrealistic and conflicting expectations by adults in society. So it's no wonder that when their behaviors go far out of the norm, we react with more disbelief, right? Like, how could a child do something like this is the ultimate question.
Absolutely. And while we don't diagnose individuals under the age of 18 with personality disorders, which is sort of the foundational flagstone of psychopathy, as it were, we will look at the behaviors that led us to these other labels that are used for classification and treatment. So like we've said in previous episodes, psychopathy itself is not an actual diagnosis, but we think of it as antisocial personality disorder to the nth degree or on steroids. And children are capable of exhibiting some of these really disturbing traits. And just to front this entire episode with a vital caveat, many of the symptoms and behaviors of children that can seem very antisocial or psychopathic may actually be the result of trauma that they have experienced through any type of abuse or neglect, as well as exposure to chronic and severe adverse environments. Very important to remember this.
Yeah, thank you for that. So as a little review, while psychopath is not an official mental health diagnosis, it is a term used to describe a cluster of characteristics and behaviors indicating things like callousness, lack of caring, deceitfulness. And in current psychiatric terminology, these traits are typically associated with the aforementioned antisocial personality disorder. And again, we'll continue to dispel the misconception that individuals with psychopathy immediately equate to potential serial killers, as of course Hollywood has taught us, and as we talked about a lot in our criminal profiling episode recently, when in reality most people with psychopathy do not become serial killers. Some even excel as entrepreneurs and business leaders. And for your reference, according to one study, around 3% of business leaders may exhibit psychopathic traits.
So our statistics show that about 1% of adults meet the criteria for psychopathy. And while it's more common among males, psychopathy is not exclusive to one sex. And the stats are muddy here because there's evidence that female psychopaths may operate and navigate the world in very different ways than their male counterpoints, likely due to cultural and societal influences. So in looking at the differences between males and females that exhibit psychopathic tendencies, the research finds that male psychopaths more frequently show antisocial and physical aggression, like physical fights and criminal activity, while females tend to display aggression that is more relational and verbal, such as manipulation or strategically utilizing subterfuge to get their needs met. They're sneaky and they're really good at it. And it's a fancy way of saying that. So studies show that female psychopaths are more likely to engage in self-destructive behaviors as well, which is not as common in males.
Yes. With children, it's vital to remember that many symptoms and behaviors in other diagnoses overlap with psychopathy, like a Venn diagram. So let's pull that apart a bit. We are going to look at psychopathy versus conduct disorder versus oppositional defiant disorder, and try to do that as clearly as possible for you guys.
It's a lot, but we're going to try to boil it down.
It is, but yeah, I think we did a tidy job of that here. So one of the childhood behavioral diagnoses is called oppositional defiant disorder, and it's characterized by a persistent pattern of negative, defiant, and hostile behavior towards authority figures, particularly parents and teachers, right? The most face time they have with any adults are usually going to be parents and teachers, and they're authoritative entities in their life. So oppositional defiant disorder typically emerges during early childhood or the pre-adolescent years, causing distress and disruption in the child's life and the lives of those around them. The predominant observed behaviors include frequent anger and irritability, defiance and noncompliance, argumentative behavior, blaming others, vindictiveness, and temper tantrums. Now, everyone out there who has a preteen or teen is probably like, I'm sorry, what did you say about my child right now?
Right. It's like, and
yes.
And here's what's difficult. A good bit of these are normal for children as they learn to individuate and find their own sense of self and navigate the world around them. ODD, or oppositional defiant disorder, can be treated with medication, but it's proposed that if the condition is not transient or temporary on its own, it could be just a transitional diagnosis for something more prominent. And so that leads us into the next potential diagnosis, which is called conduct disorder. So take everything that we've already talked about, all of those mood symptoms and all of those problems with authority, and then let's bump it up one. Let's bump it up to the point where we add one super important criteria, and that criteria is a consistent pattern of violating the rights of others and disregarding social norms. So it's not that, look, I mean, I love nothing more than a quirky kid. Like quirky kids just make me so happy. Like, you know, a kid that shows up to a princess theme party dressed as a hot dog. Like, I'm telling you, that's so cool, right? But when we talk about social norms, we're talking about someone who just absolutely is wired to believe that the rules do not apply to them, and it starts exhibiting very early in these cases. But when you see these types of emerging symptoms or behaviors, it's definitely required to get a clinician to do a full evaluation. You can't just kind of, as a parent, figure this out on your own. And I'm saying that very distinctly and firmly because I want to normalize it for parents. I want parents to not feel that they are alone, and I don't want them to feel gaslit by social influencers or their relatives when they feel something's really off with their kid. You know, get the support that you need. And it's important to us as clinicians, conduct disorder is, because we want to understand it in a bigger picture of symptoms and behaviors and environment, so that if we see something coming down the road, we might be able to engage and implement some interventions that can literally change the path of somebody's life.
Absolutely. And so these are really just building blocks of severity. And as the child gets older, we can kind of see where this is going to lead, or like you said, is this going to fizzle out? But when we do examine someone for potential psychopathic traits or meeting the criteria for psychopathy, the one thing we go back and look at is their evidence of conduct disorder when they were a juvie. So again, just kind of building blocks here.
And I was also going to add, to just piggyback on what you wrapped up right there, is that as a clinician, if we look at that bigger picture that I was describing and we see other red flag behaviors, that's when we get really worried. And those two other factors would be, unsurprisingly, things that true crime aficionados will be familiar with. It would be harm to animals and setting fires.
Yeah.
Those elements in a child are certainly markers of concern.
So why does psychopathy exist and continue to exist in today's world? I think this is something, you know, you mentioned at the top, we sometimes get asked this question, or we bring it up because people are just stuck on, you know, the serial killer thing. And so we proposed some ideas before, but we can look to the research also and see that statistically the presence of psychopaths has been noted throughout history. And it's understandable that particular facets of the psychopath personality have survived, because when they present in relatively moderate amounts, they can serve a valuable purpose. If you need a surgeon and you want one that's cool and detached and does his job really well and isn't going to get overly emotionally involved with patients, that's an example. Maybe a high-performing financier that is focused solely on gain, likely to be a very successful individual in that field. And there's other areas where they excel: attorneys, media personalities. We have politicians, salespersons, clergy, chefs, and yes, even police officers. Again, we're talking about facets. We're talking about some slight traits, not full-blown psychopaths for those working in roles of great responsibility. But there's got to be a balance there of, you know, also having empathy and wanting to help others, to also having that urge of running towards danger, which could be one of those risk-taking behaviors that people with some facets have.
It makes me think of, I can't remember the name of the movie, but Alec Baldwin was in a thriller. I think Nicole Kidman was in it, and he plays a surgeon, like one of the top surgeons in a major metropolitan area. And he plays him like a complete narcissist, but he's also a narcopath. He's got a lot of psychopath tendencies, and he's
Yeah.
on the stand, and someone accuses him of having a God complex. And he says, I am God. When
Oh,
I'm in the operating room, I am God,
I remember
which
that
is
scene now
which
that
is
you say
not
it.
untrue for when you want someone, like you said, cool and detached and knows exactly what they're doing. And is also, they're doing it, they're going to protect their reputation, right? A
Yeah.
full-blown psychopath, they used to think that full-blown psychopaths would be great for the military, but they're not. Why are they not great for the military? Because they don't follow rules.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah. They're not just killing machine robots.
Right. They're going
I
to
mean, they
place
could
their
be.
needs above anybody else's, right?
Yeah.
So it's when these distorted facets of human behavior that start to emerge in a non-moderate way that it really gets to be problematic. And as psychology research has expanded into this area, there's been a lot of interest in focusing on and identifying the early indicators that can predict, to use a term, whether or not a child is at risk of developing more of just traits into a full-blown diagnosis at some point in their life.
Yeah. So when we look at the stats, approximately 1% of children will exhibit some traits of psychopathy. And this is really interesting because that rate is similar to that of autism or bipolar disorder among individuals of that same age group. And people, again, I know we say this a lot.
Take a breath.
Correlation is not causation. Okay. It's just an interesting statistical impact on the population and the effect that it can have. So, again, as Scott always says, it's notable, right? We want to look at it and go, oh,
Interesting.
what is that about? Yeah. So in 2013, the American Psychiatric Association took the step of officially integrating the terms callous and unemotional traits into the DSM 5, which is our big book of diagnoses, really for the purposes of billing most of the times. Remember, the DSM is not an exhaustive tool for diagnoses, but actually just a springboard to help the clinician sort of weed through what they're looking at. But taking this action was a big step to finally acknowledge that the covert or hidden nature of this condition may be partly due to the fact that many children possessing these traits can be charming and socially adept enough to conceal them effectively and understand that adults still hold relative power over their day-to-day lives.
So just to reiterate, we're giving a lot of credit to kids here so that they get to be the age where they can be strategic, they can be manipulative, they can make plans, but they also understand that adults hold all the power in society. So they're not at the point where I'm 18, I'm on my own, now I can really let loose with all this stuff. So it's super important to highlight that over 50 studies have shown that children with callous and unemotional traits are significantly more likely to later engage in criminal activities or present with aggressive and psychopathic traits as compared to other kids their age. Adult psychopaths represent a small fraction of the general population, but research indicates that they're responsible for a significant proportion of violent crimes that we know of, right? So the good psychopaths are going to be committing crimes that we don't know about. So when we neglect looking really deeply into the research on this issue, it can have significant implications in our society at large.
The research also reveals that there are two primary pathways that contribute to the likelihood that childhood behaviors may ultimately lead to the classification of psychopathy in adulthood. As illustrated in the three-legged stool analogy, these pathways encompass two factors influenced by genetic predisposition, the nature portion, and another influenced by environmental factors, the nurture portion. But it's essential to note that while it isn't a rigid determinant, adverse environmental circumstances such as growing up in a highly stressful, low socioeconomic environment or experiencing consistent family abuse, even living in threatening and dangerous neighborhoods, can play a role in fostering violent and callous behaviors in children. Now, it's crucial to pause also and acknowledge the primary support leg of this metaphorical stool. Children demonstrating these traits are not inherently callous and unemotional. Therefore, researchers in this field theorize that removing them from abusive, neglectful, and victimizing environments may actually serve as an effective intervention to disrupt or prevent a direct pathway towards psychopathy.
It's fascinating.
Yep.
It's just so fascinating. And it speaks to, why do I always blank on his name, the researcher with the brain scans?
Dr. James Fallon.
Dr. James Fallon, not Jimmy Fallon, Dr. James Fallon. Right. So he's one of the ones that will say about his story is, I came from a great family. Yeah. I was taught great lessons. I had parameters. I had boundaries. And that is his main theory, is that's why I didn't turn out a serial killer, right? But why is this 3-factor model so important? Because environmental factors may also include poor bonding with a parent, and that can stem from mental health issues such as substance use or a lack of contact and interaction with an infant, that then leads to the child's inability to form healthy attachments. Now, I do have to say, because I pulled that right from the research, I find it really fascinating. And everything that we know about having children now, currently, just, we get more and more knowledge. Like my nieces and nephews that have gone on to have kids, the emphasis they have put on the sleep schedule for their infants and toddlers not only makes their lives easier as adults, but also just makes their children thrive, right?
Yeah.
But that's because we know now. We didn't always have this information at hand. And that's just one example about how to parent your child. We didn't know about skin to skin bonding. We didn't know about the levels of oxytocin that get released. You just didn't know those things in the past like we know it now. Just so important.
It is. Inconsistent caregiving can really have a significant impact on a child's ability to connect with adults. And it can lead to some serious challenges later in life, including other spots on the personality disorder spectrum, like borderline, narcissistic, or histrionic. And the research shows that male adolescents with psychopathy are more likely to have gone through adverse childhood events in their early years, maybe even being victimized, neglected, or bullied. But that model doesn't hold up with teenage psychopaths. The inconsistency can look more like the frequent changes in foster homes and the dysfunction that arises from that type of instability. In the teenage years, we see more overt traits that align with the way that they experience and express negative emotions, such as fear and sadness. And at this stage, research points out the challenges in picking up on other people's emotions and being able to mirror that a little bit.
Really great points. Along with these other sort of conduct disorderly traits that parents might recognize, this is a big one too, that your child does not recognize emotions in other people or is unable to name or describe what other people are experiencing. There are many examples within this relatively rare subset of children that exhibit callous and unemotional traits that even when raised in loving, supportive homes and secure neighborhoods, they may exhibit some of these behaviors. Well-constructed studies conducted around the world with these child populations show the highly hereditary and neurologically ingrained nature of this early onset condition. This is really significant because it indicates that childhood psychopathy is challenging to treat. And Dr. Adrian Rain, highly recommend you read our show notes and read some of his articles that we post. Very well-known, respected researcher in this area. He asserts that even in cases where parents provide unwavering love and support, some kids are going to go on and still exhibit these traits from an early age. Now, even when influenced by genetic factors or environment, an unempathetic child is not automatically destined to become a psychopath, like Dr. Shiloh said earlier. There are estimates that suggest, with great relief to many of the parents out there, that 4 out of 5 children exhibit these behaviors or traits do not go on to turn into psychopaths. Wow. I mean, we're really saying psychopath a lot here.
I know.
As much as we say. We shouldn't say psychopath, but we're saying psychopath. But as we referred to earlier, it stumps researchers in attempting to figure out why some do grow into well-adjusted adults while others just absolutely veer towards that criminal behavior.
That's $1 million question, right?
Right.
Parents and some trained observers can identify the lack of empathy, flat emotionality, and callous traits in a child as young as 3 or 4. The difference in parents is that many times parents still doubt their observations and conclusions or have those observations dismissed by other parties. A great media example that we'll circle back to at the end here is the movie We Need to Talk About Kevin that hits this point. So at age 3 or 4, children who are developing within the expected parameters that are currently recognized will typically tend to display distress when witnessing other children in distress. They will react in ways that either offer comfort, or maybe they just remove themselves from the situation because they're feeling the distress going on. And in stark contrast, children with these psychopathic traits exhibit either sort of a disturbing detachment to what's going on or a chilling interest with what would be considered an incongruent emotional response to what's happening. There are some researchers that claim that they have followed these traits back to the period of infancy. So there's a study that was conducted at King's College London where they observed and evaluated over 200 5-week-old infants, and the research focused on tracking their preferences for looking at a person's face or a red ball. And those favoring the ball were more likely to exhibit callous traits 2.5 years later.
See, this is what's so great about research.
Fascinating.
Right. Even, I mean, I found it really interesting too, as I pulled that bit for the podcast today, is that of course, like the squirrel I am, I got completely pulled into a rabbit hole or a squirrel hole of research.
I like
and
it.
It was
Copyright
showing,
that.
it was creating visuals for the viewer of this article as to if you were a newborn, what your ability to focus would be. And they would be like, here's it at 1 week and it's just a blur, right?
Yeah.
And then here's it at 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And so it's really just jarring how long it takes for a child to be able to actually focus. They can get like the broader expressions like big eyes and, laughing and your mouth open, but they don't see anything but much of a blur. So the idea that like parents, and we're all talking like very animated to children, but that a child would be more interested in a ball.
Yep.
Like, wow.
That's all in the baby books. They show you that in the baby books too. Little tidbit. That's why areolas have a color to them. So your child can see where to hit the target to breastfeed.
Too much information. Now I know. We just need that little banner to go across the podcast. The more you know.
Scott just zoned out right now. He dissociated for a second.
Okay. No, I'm sorry. I'm not offended by nipples, male or female. I'm just messing with you, Dr. Shiloh.
Stop talking about lady parts, Shiloh.
Don't talk about lady parts. But like we said, even though you're seeing those at the beginning and they're observable traits at such an early age, the more prominent and more significant traits are going to slowly emerge as that child matures. Dr. Kent Keel from the University of New Mexico, and also the author of The Psychopath Whisperer, very good book. I just picked it up on Amazon used. You probably would not want me telling you that you can buy it used on Amazon, but it's a really good book. And it is, if you're a true crime fan, it's another great one to put into your library. And Dr. Keel has pointed out that when a child age 8, 9, or 10 engages in transgressions or criminal acts while alone, outside of the significant influence of others and without peer pressure as a motivating factor, this is a big deal, right? So it's not that he's trying to impress anybody. It's not that he is on his own. He is having a sense of autonomy about his actions, right? So this is a significant factor that reflects that in that individual, they have an inherent inclination towards causing harm. So Keel then follows up with another telling sign called, quote unquote, criminal versatility, or what is better known as the act of committing various types of crimes in different settings with a drive.
So I see them as like testing their urges and almost like experimentation, right? Like testing, seeing what happens when they're causing harm.
Yes.
Sitting back, looking at, okay, how did others react? It's very troubling.
Right. And Keel was able to back this up by not only his observations of children, but then following up with studying psychopaths in the U.S. prison system. So he was able to review through interview their family history, their developmental histories, and all of them showed multiple incidents of violent confrontations with, guess who? Teachers during elementary or junior high school.
Wow.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So they're in another situation of authority that's not their parents. Like say they come from an adverse child experience environment where they have a domineering or authoritarian and abusive parent, then they go to school where they know that a teacher does not have as much power as their parent does, and they test the boundaries in violent ways. Fascinating stuff. So,
as we look towards younger children, just to flesh this out more, like what would we see going on with them? 2016 study by the University of Michigan suggests that the early signs of psychopathy can manifest in children as young as 2 years old. And even at this age, they exhibit differences in empathy and conscience. Caregivers, teachers, daycare providers rated callous, unemotional behavior in children aged 2 to 4 based on these following items or different behaviors that they had listed in their study. So there were 5 things. The first one was lack of guilt after a misbehavior. The second one was unresponsiveness to punishment. That would have been me. The third was selfishness and unwillingness to share. The fourth was dishonesty. And the fifth was sneakiness and manipulation. So the researchers followed up with these children at the age of 9, discovering that those who displayed more conduct issues as toddlers were more likely to exhibit later behavioral problems associated with psychopathy. Children with psychopathic traits may engage in cruelty towards animals or attempt to harm them for lack of a better term, sport and excitement. And then tweens, teenagers, and older children may engage in harming and killing animals, actually for sexual gratification, is what they have found, which often co-occurs with conduct disorder and eventually antisocial personality disorder. Psychopathy can present differently throughout childhood, really as various characteristics and behaviors start to manifest and really evolve over time.
It's interesting. You were unresponsive to punishment. I was just dishonest. I lied about everything as a kid.
Oh my gosh.
I lied nonstop as a kid about dumb stuff. Like,
yeah,
just, in some ways people will go, oh, you were being creative. Like, oh no, I was a little liar. I was just a little liar about everything.
I think you've even said like, okay, I'll give a few percentage points to Southern storytelling, but yeah, there's more than that.
Maybe it is in our wiring. It could be. But let me rewind just a little bit and build on what you just shared. And let me break down the emergence of those specific behaviors that you were talking about that we want to look at. So in early childhood, and that means infancy to preschool, you're going to be looking for a lack of empathy, disobedience, lack of guilt, and aggression. So lack of empathy, little kids can be psychopaths. Like we can, that's sort of.
Yeah, we call them assholes.
Right? Yeah, they're little assholes, right? But the lack of guilt is a big one because most kids will realize that they have done something and they get it very quickly. But then when we move on to middle school, which is here in the US, elementary school years,
middle childhood. Yeah.
So let me move on to middle childhood, which here in the US, we would say the elementary school years. Then we see the emergence. If the child is veering in this direction, we see the emergence of manipulative behaviors. And manipulative behaviors indicate the presence of what we call secondary gain. The manipulation has a reason, it has a motivation, it has a drive. It's not just done for shits and giggles. It's done because they're going to get something from these actions, right? And then on top of that, and supporting that effort may be deceit, further lying, and then additionally, those conduct issues that we talked about very early on. Now we're also going to be starting the emergence of challenges in peer relationships. We're going to start seeing some real interpersonal deficits. So what they do is the kids get better at emulating appropriate interpersonal responses, and it becomes sort of this mask persona that they become really pretty deft at utilizing, right? But they also may then use that to adopt this role of the bully and then carry out more aggressive acts. So then we move on to the adolescence, which are the teenage years. And that's when you start to see the emergence of criminal activities and the real defiance of social norms. Much more risky behaviors, maybe experimenting with drugs, alcohol, a real lack of remorse, and then increased manipulative efforts and social influence on those around them, as well as a big one, impulsivity. You really start to see here. Now, it may be difficult early on with that child because ADHD has a huge overlap with many kids in impulsivity. But here at adolescence, in the presence of these other factors in this spectrum or this continuum, we know it's going to be problematic.
Yeah. And it's not just that you can pick out one of these. These are factors that are swirling around each other in this perfect storm to really cluster to start leading towards this. So yeah, please don't take just one of these as indication of something as serious as psychopathy. But there exists actually an evaluation tool out there for people under the age of 18. So the Youth Psychopathic Traits Inventory, the YPI, is one of the most commonly used assessments designed to measure personality traits rather than behaviors. And it assesses symptoms such as dishonest charm, grandiosity, lying, manipulation, callousness, unemotionality, remorselessness, impulsiveness, thrill seeking, and irresponsibility. So really mirrors the psychopathy checklist, which is for adults, pretty well. And then adolescents with high callous and unemotional traits often end up affiliating with antisocial and delinquent peers and engaging in group criminal activities. Children exhibiting psychopathy traits are more likely to be leaders who influence others within their group to engage in antisocial behaviors and carrying out plans with them. They kind of get everybody on board to their misdeeds.
It's that particular example. I will post this on social media once we get this episode up, but that reminds me of a really chilling and disturbing post that came out a couple of years ago, where someplace in the Midwest, a middle-aged guy, probably in his 50s, is going to the town council to confront like the mayor, so it's one of these like city council things where people can get up and speak, and there's some kind of legislation that's supposed to be like anti-bullying. And this guy gets up and he looks like your typical Midwest dad, like he's got cargo shorts on and sort of like a golf shirt or something, and maybe even Crocs. And he gets up with his voice trembling and he confronts the mayor, saying, "It's really ironic that you have this program started because you bullied me relentlessly for 4 years. You were cruel. You laughed at me, you and your friends." I mean, it's really jarring. It was like something, it's almost like a scene from a movie, because you can tell this guy, as a middle-aged man, is scarred by his experience. And then like maybe, I remember thinking, well, maybe there's something going on with him. Maybe it's not actually real. And then they flip the camera around and the mayor is just like completely like
shark eyes,
robot face with shark eyes.
Yep. Wow.
There you go. Perfect example.
Yeah. So this is tricky, right? Yeah. There's a lot of challenges in diagnosing, for some of the things you talked about at the top. Just with children, we don't diagnose personality disorders. We don't diagnose a lot of disorders. And of course, very careful when we're looking at personality. But then also, to say it's tough to diagnose, again, psychopathy isn't even a diagnosis. So you have these traits and you're like, okay, well, what do I do with this? And how is this going to be helpful in maybe guiding them towards treatment or an intervention? But to me, that seems to be the usefulness of what we're talking about here.
Yeah. And what makes it so increasingly complex in today's world is that, let's just say in the best case scenario, a set of parents or a parent figures out something's going on and they need to implement some strategies. Well, where the hell do they go for something like this? And are you in a metropolitan area that actually has a program with child specialists that can offer you insight and education on what is needed? And then, even then, the treatment protocols that I'm going to describe, they're very tricky because they require a lot of containment and they require discipline. But how far do you go with discipline in today's world?
Right.
And very reasonable. And believe me, I'm not like veering over into, it needs to be more authoritarian, because you're dealing with neurology and how does the child experience what the rules being placed on them are. Do they experience it as an adverse childhood experience? It's very tricky. Mm-hmm. But what we do know is that there are some therapeutic approaches for this, especially if the child is school age. The school is going to have to be involved. Like there's going to have to be parameters at school, possibly even what we call here in Southern California an IEP, an individualized education program, to the extent that even some of the clients I've had on my caseload in the past have had individual one-to-one behavioral assistance throughout their school day.
Yep.
And then they go home to a very structured environment, which will wear a parent out. Like, I do not wish this on anybody because it's a lot. But it also shows that all of these things together in the world, in the best of all possible worlds, can actually make a huge impact. So managing that is difficult, but it also has some really good outcomes. And we've seen it in the presentation of other diagnoses, how these behavioral containment interventions can really be helpful. The long-term outcome is spotty because it depends on early intervention, consistent intervention, their ethical and legal considerations, like I was speaking about. And then we even have to look at, you've gone through this experience of having your child act in this way. You go through all the steps and you may not even have the right diagnosis until the child is old enough to actually have a diagnosis. So again, it's great that we have this information and this research and some directives and support for parents out there, but you need to intervene very quickly and do the research. And hopefully for some people, if out there listening, maybe this is a springboard if you know somebody that's struggling.
Yeah, exactly. And isn't this kind of the protocol that the girl from Child of Rage went through to
Perfect
recover
example.
and heal from this? I mean, this intense structure.
Yes. In fact, they used a protocol with her that I believe was almost completely parallel with treatment for reactive attachment disorder.
Yes, that's right.
So, and that
That's
is
right.
very like literally every night. I mean, not in that particular case, but I do know examples of when I've gone to trainings of, adolescent male, and he comes home from school, and after dinner, he sits on the couch, shoulder to shoulder between parents for literally 3 hours. He does his homework, shoulder to shoulder with parents. He watches TV, shoulder to shoulder with parents. And it's all about that contact and rewiring the brain.
Yes.
But yeah, Child of Rage is great. We've got so many other examples that we barely can go into Child of Rage, but it's free on YouTube. Highly recommend it. It's chilling, but it's really good to watch. So let's give some media examples. The one that Shiloh referred to earlier, which is really one of the most well done ones. I mean, well done from a dramatic perspective, is We Need to Talk About Kevin. And that was shot back in 2011. It was a psychological thriller directed by Lynn Ramsey, and it's based on a novel by Lionel Shriver by the same name. And this movie explores the life of Ava Kachadorian. She is a mother grappling with the horrific aftermath of a tragic event involving her son, Kevin. So the film itself is presented in a non-linear narrative. It's constantly switching back and forth in time between Eva's past experience and where she is presently. And of course, Eva is portrayed by actor Tilda Swinton, who basically is capable of playing any character ever written.
Totally.
She's just unbelievable. And her performance as Eva is about the struggles of a mother who constantly tries to connect with her son, Kevin, from his infancy. And her concerns about Kevin are constantly minimized and dismissed by her absolutely clueless husband, who, after my second watching, I realized he's a complete covert narcissist. He's a complete covert narcissist. He downplays and excuses all of Kevin's increasingly disturbing behaviors. And then Kevin is later played as a teenager by a very controversial actor, Ezra Miller. Mm-hmm. And they depict this character as really highly troubled and clearly manipulative, cruel, and disturbingly malevolent from an early age. But what's so fascinating is that he doesn't do anything that seems completely out of the left part. It's not like this movie goes so big that it's completely unbelievable and dramatic. It's like, oh no, kids will do that. Kids will do that. They won't go that far, but they'll do that. It's very believable.
Yeah, I think so too. And just what a great title. I always thought that was just such a cool way to name it, because it does get to those deeper issues of parents not being believed, even by her own husband, or him just kind of being dismissive about it. And how many parents can say that they have turned to someone and said, hey, we need to talk about insert your child's name, just about anything, not something this big, but it kind of hits home in that way.
Well, and in this film, the big event is that eventually Kevin engages in a mass event at his school that results in the deaths, family members, and the deaths of students. And there's just this years long aftermath that Eva has to deal with, and showing her visits in prison with him. It's really well done. I think it's probably one of the better presentations of this type of diagnoses.
Yeah, agreed. And then we have a classic from 1956.
So classic.
Which has been redone a gajillion times, but the original, The Bad Seed, is from 1956, which, I mean, just what a title, right? I mean, The Bad Seed. My mom and I used to joke about this all the time because it would be on television, and
it was on television all the time.
We'd refer back to it.
Oh, and I remember in Southern culture, it's like, oh, that child's a bad seed.
There you go.
That is just a bad seed.
Yeah.
That child ain't right.
Or a bad egg, like Willy Wonka style. But this is about a family. So there's an Air Force colonel and his wife who dote on their pigtailed daughter, Rhoda, which is also funny to think of, like a child named Rhoda.
Yeah.
Like children were named Rhoda at some point. And their landlady also dotes on her a bit. She's, the lonely landlady. But Rhoda has a secret. And let's just say, a friend of hers mysteriously dies and all of her true colors are shown. I mean, I don't know. How would you describe this? Campy?
Very campy. It's over the top. One of the things about this particular movie is that it was a novel to begin with, and then it was a stage play. And they basically kind of turned the stage play into a movie, and they didn't really adapt it as well as they should. But it's still, I mean, it's funny and campy, but it's also chilling because the actress, Patty McCormick, that plays Rhoda, she goes after like a school child that you never see. And the way she takes him out is just horrible.
Oh, no.
And that's only one of her victims. But maybe we can do a watch party for this. That would be a good one.
This would be a good one.
Okay.
Yeah. So they also redid it in 2018. Rob Lowe was in it. Oh, there was a 1985 TV movie version. I think all they did were made for TV movies in the 80s.
It was a big industry then.
Yeah, for sure. And The Bad Seed returns in 2020. So 2018, and then 2022. Those were done by the same people. But this would be a great watch party idea.
Right. So there's another one that's actually really good with some amazing actors that are all adults now. This one is called The Good Son. So it's almost like the flipped version of The Bad Seed.
Yes.
But it's modern. It stars Elijah Wood as Mark, and he is a young boy who loses his mother, and he has to stay with his extended family while his dad is out traveling for work. So Mark, is at first kind of excited because he is acquainted with his cousin, Henry, who's the same age and played by Macaulay Culkin. So already Elijah Wood and Macaulay Culkin.
Oh my gosh. It was like magic. I remember this.
Totally magic and creepy as hell because Macaulay Culkin plays, I mean, when Mark starts to realize just how evil his cousin is and the way he plays it, I mean, the kid switches from iciness. It is terrifying.
I know.
And I will say this, it's really over the top as to what the kid lays in plans for. Like he creates a mass event at, age 8 or something, which is not completely believable, but they make it seem pretty plausible.
Yeah, very good. That was very chilling. And of course, there's another Culkin in it too. Quinn.
Quinn?
Yeah, Quinn, the sister.
Oh, I didn't know her. I only know Kieran, who is also an accomplished actor as well. So wow, the whole family.
That family, man. And then there's another one called Case 39.
I loved this one.
Kind of threw this in there, although, little twist to it. We're still not too far behind Halloween.
Right.
But Renee Zellweger plays a social worker who basically thinks she has seen it all, which social workers, I'm sure you really have. And then she meets 10-year-old Lilith, And
which that's a dead giveaway.
Oh my gosh, I know.
Name your child Lilith, the queen of demons. Come on.
The queen of demons and her cruel parents. And when the parents try to harm the child, Emily assumes custody of Lilith, which I don't think social workers are supposed to personally do that. But this is under, the fact that she's like looking for a foster family for her. But this is when she finds that dark forces surround this seemingly innocent child. So it's more of like a possession, themes to
more
this.
Supernatural.
Yeah, more horror, supernatural as it starts to unfold. But
I'm glad we included this one, though. I'll tell you why. I wanted to do something that was slightly supernatural because it's one of the reasons I love Henry James's novel, The Turn of the Screw, and also the adaptation of it from the 60s, which is The Innocents, which is also what, if anybody's watching Haunting of Bly Manor, Mike Gallagher on Netflix is sort of loosely based on this. And it kind of goes, I guess it kind of really overlaps with another mental health issue where an adult is delusional about their child being evil.
Yeah.
And so Case 39, the young girl playing like both sides of being this innocent child, then when the demon is in control. And then also the twist on it is that the parents weren't cruel. The parents were trying to keep her away from the world because they knew she was so dangerous.
Got it.
But again, I love that. I mean, I remember one of my assignments when I was in my master's program, we had to take a media representation of a mental illness and then study the diagnosis in the DSM and write a paper on it like we're doing an evaluation. And I chose Rosemary's Baby because I thought, well, what if Rosemary's just hallucinating all of it?
Love it.
And so, yeah, again, that's a fictionalized version, as are other media examples. But going back to, we need to talk about Kevin. If you haven't seen it, it's not lighthearted. It's dark.
Yeah.
It's really dark. It's also about how adults can be absolutely cruel to other adults who have gone through unbelievable tragedy that they have no control over. There's a link to that, to the parents of several mass event perpetrators over the past 30 years here in the US that I think it's pretty apt. I think it's pretty well presented. So we've had tons of requests for this subject for quite a while now. We could dive deeper into other cases. We may come back to it, but we thought this would be a great groundwork for what research currently exists on this subject.
Fascinating stuff. Another great episode in the books. I'm definitely going to pick up The Psychopath Whisperer. I didn't know that book existed before this. So yeah, keep the requests coming, you guys. We honestly keep a list, and we spontaneously think of things every once in a while, but we do go back to that list for inspiration from time to time. So please send your requests our way. And with that, we will hopefully see you on our our live stream Behind the Couch. Sometimes it's a party and you're watching, but you can see our faces in that one. And we'll have another great documentary review episode for you guys next week. So we'll see you next time on LA
Not So
Confidential. Bye, guys.
Bye, folks.
We sincerely thank you for spending some time with us today. LA Not So Confidential is part of the Crawl Space Media Network in partnership with Glassbox Media. Each episode is hosted, produced, and written by Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh. Our post-production editing and sweetening magic is handled by the multi-talented Jason Usry of Ear Cult Productions.
The LA Not So Confidential theme, entitled Cool Vibes Film Noir, is composed and performed by the talented Kevin MacLeod. He graciously allows us to use his music via a Creative Commons attribution license, and you can check out all of Kevin's amazing work on YouTube.
All of the resources for each episode can be found on our website at la-not-so-confidential.com. You can find us on Instagram at LA Not So Podcast, on Twitter at LA Not So Pod, and on Facebook at LA Not So Confidential. Media inquiries and bookings are scheduled at alienistentertainment@gmail.com.
Please join us each month on Saturdays at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for a live streaming and very interactive broadcast on YouTube entitled Behind the Couch. Stay tuned to all of our social media for our live streaming scheduling announcements.
Subscribe to LA Not So Confidential so you never miss a new episode. And lastly, we'd be honored if you joined our Patreon at patreon.com/LA Not So Podcast. With a subscription, you get an ad-free listening experience, and you'll be the first notified about upcoming live events, social gatherings, and super cool swag coming your way.
Thanks for listening, and join in with us next time on LA
Not So
Confidential. Bye, folks.